This is Canada, a massive frozen wasteland shoved into the corner of the globe, and way down here is the tiny British territory of the Turks and Caicos Islands. These places are so incredibly different from each other than they were both created by the British. Now why would Canada want anything to do with these tiny islands? Because for years and years there have been proposals for the Turks and Caicos Islands to join Canada. I mean, why not? America has their own Caribbean getaway, and so does France and the Netherlands. And Britain has way too many islands from their pre-Brexit days to give a couple away to its child. Why did Canada never start their own Caribbean empire, and will it ever happen? The first question is obviously why? Why would Canada bother taking over this Caribbean island and incorporating it into itself? Other than expanding influence over the region and growing its economic zone, Canadians would gain a free access pass to the Caribbean. Tourism would boom in the Turks and Caicos. It's a way to leave the snow and ice and more snow during the winter while staying within Canada. Obviously, there was strong support in Canada for anything that would let you leave the mainland. What about in Turks and Caicos though? The tiny British territory would have just been transferred from one country to another. Instead of being tied economically and politically to the UK, they would become tied to the closer nation of Canada. What are the advantages? It would use the same currency as Canada, and as part of Canada, get closer to the nearest major power, the United States. Access to Canadian systems of government and education, and an implosion of tourism revenue. It sounds great for both countries, right? It sure did to the islanders, because in the 1980s over 90% of Turks and Caicos supported joining Canada, with a majority of Canadians also supporting the proposal, and surprisingly the United Kingdom didn't really get in the way of this transaction of islands. Canada simply just moved on, particularly distracted by the politics at this time, like the new NAFTA agreement that changed Canadian politics drastically. Some people also think the two regions were just too distinct from one another. Canada is a multicultural society, whereas the islands are almost entirely made up of Afro-Caribbean descendants, which critics say would create a weird pocket of outside culture that might not share Canadian multiculturalism, totally not like anything else in Canada already. In addition, the Turks and Caicos Islands have battled with corruption for a long time now, which has scared many Canadians to keep the islands out. The corruption got so bad that Britain had to take away their right to self-government in 1986 and again in 2009. There hasn't been any recent waves of support nowadays, but if it ever were to happen, how would the Turks and Caicos join Canada? Canada had three ways it could have slapped the islands into the country, either by making a brand new province, making it a new federal territory like the northern regions, or by sticking it into another existing province. And realistically, because of a whole bunch of politics and balance of power within Canada, the Turks and Caicos never ever would have became a new province. So it's either territory or into an existing province, and the province it would join is almost certainly Nova Scotia. It's the province closest to the islands, conducts the most trade with the islands, and has already written a resolution inviting Turks and Caicos into the province. But really, making it a territory is the easiest option. Only the federal government needs to say yes with no inputs from the provinces. Could this ever have happened? This idea goes back to the 1910s, where the Prime Minister of Canada asked to take over the islands, getting rejected by British imperialism. The real support goes back to the 1970s, when a wave of independence had just blown through the British Caribbean and hit the Turks' neighbor, the Bahamas. Turks and Caicos was way too small for a successful independence story, so instead they asked Britain to join Canada in 1974. However, the Canadian government did not support the union, so the islands asked for self-government, and it was granted to them in 1976, killing a huge amount of momentum for the movement. The pro-independence party won an election planning on declaring full independence, later stopped by the anti-independence party winning in 1982, starting up talks to join Canada once again. This is the peak of support for joining Canada, but if you know anything about the Canadian government, it's that it moves slow. Very, very slow. And by the time there are serious debates about union with the islands, Canada had already moved on. But the Turks and Caicos still never got full rights under the UK or Canada, so independence was still in the talks, until 2002, where the British Overseas Territories Act granted full citizenship to all overseas islands of the UK, including the Turks and Caicos. And this was the final nail in the coffin, or it was until 7 years later when self-government was taken away over corruption charges, so support in the islands could very well shoot back up. The UK would be fine with losing the islands, many islanders would support leaving the UK for Canada, and the only one who hasn't and probably won't accept this is the Canadian government itself. Why doesn't Canada support this politically when many of its citizens would absolutely love for this to be a reality? To be honest, the government just did not care enough to have the burden of saving these islands. Well, not saving them, but bringing them up to Canadian standard. It is a huge decision for Canada, and there would need to be massive political support from the provinces. Not to mention, adding the relatively poor region to Canada would take away precious federal funding away from the provinces. Alberta already pays much more to the government than it gets back. It would never want to pay even more. The Atlantic provinces depend on this funding to stay afloat, and Quebec basically gets a check to stay within Canada. Why would it want to take some of that off for some tiny British islands to join a country that they voted on leaving twice? So even with public support behind bringing the island in, Canada never had and probably never will have the political support within the government. Which now brings us to nowadays. This is a debate that has long been in the past. Some people still bring it up every now and then, more in the Turks and Caicos than Canada, and the most recent exploration of this union was a visit from the Turks and Caicos Premier to Canada to improve the ties between the nations. That was back in 2014. There have been no recent pushes for this movement to actually happen. Canada is just fine forgetting this was ever discussed, and the Turks and Caicos is living well under the UK. And if I'm being honest, this will probably never happen. It's just another small fact for the history books. If you liked this video, annex the like button and merge with the subscribe button, and don't forget to check out some of my other videos. Thank you so much for watching this whole video.